Hi there, my name is Rebekah, and I work as a ghost tour guide in one of the most haunted cities in the southern United States. And if you've been following me regularly, you will notice that there's something different about this episode. That's because every fourth episode I take to answer your questions. And right now, a really common question that I'm receiving is, are there different kinds of ghosts? And if so, what are they? One thing that I want to be sure to cover before I go into this is that this particular episode is not going to be going into what happens after spirits move on from the earth. As in, I'm not going to be going into the concept of heaven or any other religious-based kind of concept. This is strictly for the energies that stay on Earth. That's not discounting any of anybody else's beliefs, but as those of you who follow me on TikTok will know, I do not get into my personal beliefs on what happens in the afterlife. There are energies that can be split into two main categories. The first category being those spirits, those souls, and I say souls, that have actually lived on the mortal plane and died. Category number two are energies themselves. So these are not souls that have lived and died, these are energies. So we have souls and we have energies. Going into those who have lived and died, I break these up into subcategories. For example, a kind of spirit that isn't particularly powerful but does have a replay effect, that would be a residual energy. A residual energy or residual haunting is the kind of haunting that is expected. Like, for example, a friend of mine, they used to live in a house where every morning at 7 a.m. they would actually hear someone going up their stairs. They could count on it almost like clockwork. Another thing that this might be is a clock actually stopping. Or if you always see something like the way that a person died. Some people actually see the way that somebody died in their home. That could very well be a residual haunting. These hauntings are understood to be more like a stain or a scar on a location. You can't necessarily talk to them or interact with them. You might feel their presence, you might feel that emotion, and I'll get into that as far as energies are concerned, but they are just there until otherwise cleansed out. Another category would be the intelligent category. Intelligent, I put into two other subcategories. You have the intelligent spirit that you can regularly interact with that may not know that they're dead. For example, if, say, you move into a home where the last person who lived there maybe died of old age and they don't recognize that they have died, they're gonna be pretty upset when they start to recognize your presence. Now, they might be really confused, for example, because they're not really gonna understand that somebody else has moved into their home because they're kind of on a different plane of energy at that point. But they're probably gonna try and move you out of the house because then they're thinking you're the ghost. And a really great example of this would be the movie The Others. Really do check that out. It's a really interesting perspective on who is the real ghost. Another form of an intelligent spirit would be those that know that they're dead. You can regularly interact with them. They may choose to like or not like you depending on how you live your life and how you interact with them. An intelligent ghost may be sticking around to look after a house, for example. One of my personal examples was we had the ghost of a woman in our previous home, and I think she was coming to understand that she was dead. There had been a few owners before us that had been there, but she was still very attached to her home. She didn't want to go. So those are the kinds of spirits you can interact with. Like, you can ask them things like, do you know where my keys are? You might be able to ask them to turn on a light or to interact with other technology. These are not clear-cut categories either. There may be a ghost who might think that they're still alive, but might not fully understand that. A good example would be if you've seen the movie The Sixth Sense. You have ghosts that are anywhere between not knowing that they're dead into understanding that they're dead, or ghosts that are still in that middle area of they get the idea that they are dead, but they're still actively trying to work as if in the mortal world. And then the next layer or category, as we're moving up in powerful spirits, so to speak, I call these ancestors or ancestor guardians or guides. With these ancestors, they are not attached to mortal things anymore. Rather, they are attached to people. It's not necessarily a bad thing. They may actually be blood kinship, or they may be kinship potentially through a soul bond. You may have someone who maybe you were going about your life, they were going about theirs in the spiritual realm, and something about you called them. They're not so much attached to a present thing as much as they are there for your assistance. Some people will call these spirit guides, some people will call them guardians, some people will call them ancestors, but they're just on a different plane. They recognize that they're dead, they know they've been dead for a while, and they're just around for our benefit. And when you think about that, that's really cool. It's the concept that we're never really alone. We've got so much support around us if we just open ourselves up to it. The next level that you would have are the really higher spirits. Some people will call these angels. Some people will call these Loa. These are spirits who may have served us as ancestors at one point in time and have just grown and grown and grown from there. So these are the really old spirits, all right? These spirits may protect over an entire family. They may protect over an entire town or a city, or even something larger. Some beliefs actually believe that there are spirits specifically for all little things. So there could be a spirit for this house, for example. There could be a spirit of my neighborhood. There could be a spirit of the town of Wilmington. There could be a spirit for the Cape Fear River. And these spirits, they're very, very high. They may have at some point lived and died and moved on, or they may kind of be a merge of energy along with that. These are deities, so to speak. They are more all-knowing and oftentimes understand more than we can comprehend. That's how high that they are. I've talked about those who have lived and died. Now we're going to talk about those who have not lived or died, those that are energies. The first form of this, and I think it is the most common, it's something called a thought form spirit or a thought form energy. And these have different tiers as well. If you've ever gone into a place and you just feel an emotion that you didn't already have, and you have no logical explanation of why you would have that emotion, that's a thought form spirit. These can work in a number of ways. For example, I was just out at Helen's Bridge in Asheville, North Carolina. There is a thought form spirit there. I think that the ghost is still there, but I also think the thought form spirit is there. Before I even got there, I felt sad. And it wasn't just me. My mom was with me. She felt sad as well. It was something we couldn't describe. And then we got to the bridge and we were like, that's it. That's the reason. You could have thought form spirits that are sad. You could have them that are angry. You could have them that are chaotic. You could also have positive ones as well. Some people will describe going into a place of worship or a monastery or a place of meditation, and they just feel peace. They feel light. That is another form of a thought form spirit. Thought form energies can also follow people. It kind of works the same way. If you're ever around somebody and they just give you a particular feeling, and it's not their body language, it's just something about them. And it could be happiness, but it could also be sadness. A way for you to kind of recognize that is if you start having emotions that aren't yours. And it's not as if we're an empathic thing. It's not like anybody around you could be giving you that emotion. And you're having emotions that you may recognize are just a little off. If this is normal for you, then I wouldn't immediately go to the spiritual side. There is a whole psychological side that should really be looked at with any and all of this. I'm all for the science. I am all for the logistics Look at that first. These thought form energies can follow people. They can permeate a space. They can permeate a person. I'm a big person on balance. Keep that balance up. You never want to be too much of one or the other, whether happy or sad. You always want to be as balanced as you possibly can be. And that's why regular cleansings and meditation and checking yourself for your own health, always keep that up. Another form of energies are what I call parasites. Parasites, they can work along with a thought form energy. They may be the reason for a thought form energy, for example, or a thought form energy could be the reason of them. Oftentimes when somebody's really down and out, that's when a parasite really likes to leech on. Parasite is an energy that eats off of you and your emotions and your life. Parasites are oftentimes attracted to people who are already having unfortunate problems. For example, depression. Depression, while it can be explained neurologically or it might be explained environmentally, can also be explained spiritually. These parasites want to latch on to people who are already feeling down and out. That's an easy target for them. Parasites enjoy sticking around places of burial because people who go to places of burial are oftentimes really sad. And oftentimes I get all kinds of comments and emails from people saying that they think something has followed them home from a burial site. That's why there's no trouble in going to a burial site so long as you're respectful. You've got to be sure to cleanse yourself. You don't want anything following you back and potentially making it worse for you. Next up, some people will call them demons. I personally do not like the phrasing. Modern day constructs it as like this super powerful figure. There are different tiers of these other beings, and not all of them are bad, and not all of them are completely bad. Not all of them are perceived as animals. Some people see goats, things like that. In my experience, I have seen different kinds of creatures that I don't think were ever living and dying as souls. Many different cultures have different names for these kinds of higher beings. These can permeate a larger space as well. They can exist near a person or influence a person directly or influence the space. They can also influence larger things as well, economics, politics. I think people are so generally afraid of being possessed by something. These higher level spirits are not often solely caught up with individuals like us. They may be influencing world leaders. They're not so interested in fully taking us, mainly because they have better things to do. If you're looking at a possession, I would say oftentimes you're looking at a parasite that something else has kind of popped in on. Maybe you're looking at a thought form energy. All of these things, they're all trying to feed. All energy is trying to find its own energy to connect with, to feed off of. Oftentimes, if you're having, say, a full-on possession, that's likely not one thing at play. And it's likely not something that happens immediately. These are things that happen over time. A person has to be worn down in order to be moved into, to be influenced that specifically, that greatly. The main thing that I'll say with all of these kinds of negative things, check yourself. Don't be afraid. Be upfront. Be honest with yourself. Be honest with one another. And don't be afraid to ask for help. Don't be afraid to state your ground, to say, this is my life and you're not invited. The reality is that these energies, the ones who have not lived and died, can influence those who have lived and died. So, for example, I've dealt with ghosts who need to get to that next level of being removed from the mortal realm in order to therefore shed their negative thought form energies or their parasites from the mortal realm. Sometimes it's like with what happened with Helen's Bridge, you have a tragedy and then you have negative thought form energy that kind of live in that space. You may also have a person that was alive and they had all these energies attached to them and then they died, but those energies are kind of keeping them on the mortal plane. Sometimes you see spiritualists and mediums saying, you know, go to the light, move on, move on. And you might get the answer of, I can't, something's holding me back. And that can be a kind of energy. Sometimes it's a soul that's otherwise influenced. Souls want to move on unless there's a specific reason for them to stay behind. I cannot iterate this enough. For all of the negative out there, there's a balance of positive. It is just a matter of finding it and growing it. All of these things can be grown, and it's important to do your homework and to be good to yourself. Find your balance, live your life, be respectful of the dead on all tiers, and don't forget that you are important and that you matter throughout all of it. I hope you have enjoyed this episode of Question and Answers. And you'll notice too, I'm in a really casual atmosphere, and part of that is due to my voice being pretty rough right now. I have been traveling a lot. I have been to Boston, London, New York, Austin, and Asheville. I'm going to keep releasing new content that is both on my photos, looking at those on an investigation sense, stories from all the locations that I mentioned. I will keep answering your questions. Remember, you are welcome to email me. You're welcome to follow my TikTok, my Instagram. I love to hear from all of you, and I like to keep up and keep updating things as much as I possibly can. Last of all, as you know, all of this is being done on my own dime. If you are feeling generous, I will never say no to tips. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you again for Rebekah the Ghost Guide next week, every Thursday at 4.